You know, when we talk about a corrupt political system bought by billionaires like Mr. Bloomberg, it manifests itself in a tax code in which not only is Amazon and many other major corporations, some owned by the wealthiest people in this country, not paying a nickel in taxes, we have the insane situation that billionaires today, if you can believe it, have an effective tax rate lower than the middle class.
Senator,
So maybe
you're
just
the tax code. Why are you complaining?
What?
You wrote the code.
You did. You and your campaign. Not me. You and your campaign contributions electing people who represent the wealthy and the powerful.
Yes,
those are the folks.
Democrats. Thank you.
Well, and Republicans too.
Very unsavory character right there with Michael Bloomberg. However, he did tell the truth right there. He dropped down on everybody. That exchange was the pot calling the kettle black right there, with Bernie trying to point fingers. And Bloomberg also pointed out in that debate the irony in Bernie being a millionaire while he complains that poverty is rich people's fault. Then Bernie says, yeah, but what about your house though? Pot meet kettle.
Senator Sanders has a proposal that would require all large companies to turn over up to 20% of their ownership to employees over time. Is that a good idea?
Absolutely not. I can't think of ways that would make it easier for Donald Trump to get reelected than listening to this conversation. This is ridiculous. We're not going to throw out capitalism. We tried that. Other countries tried that. It was called communism, and it just didn't work.
Problem is, as Dr. Martin Luther King reminded us, we have socialism for the very rich, rugged individualism for the poor.
Wait a second.
Let me finish. When Donald Trump gets $800 million in tax breaks and subsidies to build luxury condominiums, that's socialism for the rich.
What a wonderful country we have. The best-known socialist in the country happens to be a millionaire with 3 houses. What did I miss here?
Well, you'll miss that I work in Washington, house one.
That's the first problem.
Live in Burlington, house 2.
That's good.
And like thousands of other Vermonters, I do have a summer camp. Forgive me for that. Where is your home? Which tax haven do you have your home?
New York City, thank you very much.
I want to look at the cognitive dissonance and the contradiction and hypocrisy in people who claim to have a problem with capitalism. Like this establishment Democrat nonsense. Not nonsense because it's untrue, but nonsense in pretending that there are some Democrats who are not establishment. Like some people who side with Bernie will label people like Biden and Bloomberg or Pete establishment Democrats owned by corporate America. But Democrats signed up with the military budget. Both parties are corporate. You cannot become president of the United States unless you are corporate. It costs a lot of money to become president. And none of them are anti-corporate, and neither is the American public. They're corporate, but they complain about these corporations just like we do. And we're more corporate than them. They make deals so we can get our stuff like the next iPhone IG48XJ or whatever that's coming out that we like to consume. We're corporate. Listen. Unless these people are uprooting troops from these places where there's oil and drugs, they're globalists. Unless they're talking about getting back to the days of the horse and carriage or electric vehicles and off oil, they're globalists. Unless they're talking about tilling the fields of all of America's unoccupied land to home grow our own goods and services, they're globalists. Okay? America is not an autonomous country. None of them are. Everything is connected. And I'm not talking about going back as far as making fire by grinding wood together. I'm just saying that unless these politicians are talking about a future of natural and raw living off the land life, then they're globalist. I'm just speaking to the lie that's being told on both sides. The idea that either side is anti-establishment is garbage. Like the ones who pretend to have a problem with capitalism. And as I've said a few times before, you can't be supportive or in favor of businesses and people owning their own businesses and be against capitalism. That makes no sense. What you have a problem with are monopolies. Giant companies gobbling up all the little companies. That's your problem. not capitalism. Capitalist, socialist, fascist, communist, Marxist, all of the ist. There has been and still is corruption under all of these descriptions. So switching from one to the other will change nothing because people, humans, are corrupt. I'm speaking to the people who focus on the description of the system instead of the corruptible nature of human beings. And that leads me to the anarchists who are insane. The ones who think that overthrowing a government will bring change for the good. People who have overthrown governments usually are more ruthless than the government that they overthrew. Anarchists operate under the guise that the people don't need a government. But when I listen to their end game, it is to create another government. The idea that the problem is in the ist, capitalist, socialist, fascist, communist, Marxist, that's not the problem. The problem is like the old saying that absolute power corrupts absolutely. All of the anarchists that overthrow governments are the governments we see today, and all of them are corrupt. Now, socialists, not the Bernie Sanders, the watered down Bernie Sanders variety of socialism. He's only talking about programs and safety nets. I'm talking about raw socialism. The socialists don't hear. I've listened to them. And you have to trust the government if you're a socialist. The same people who believe the government to be the evil upon the earth suggest socialism from this government. That's like you knowing a person is a registered sex offender who is also an habitual offender and you hiring that person to be the principal at an elementary school.
The fact is, it does give businesses yet another thing to consider when they go through their review of their supply chain. On top of all the other things, because you had SARS, you have the African swine virus there, now you have this. It's another risk factor that people need to take into account. So I think it will help to accelerate the return of jobs to North America.
That's Donald Trump's man, Wilbur Ross, who Trump hired to be the United States Secretary of Commerce. And I didn't play that for the purposes of engaging in my usual attacks on Republicans. I'm only pointing out the lie that either party is anti-establishment. Like what Bloomberg told Sanders. Wilbur said, let's make some money off of these events. That's establishment. That's globalist. Like last year, Donald Trump addressed the opiate problem, and people were celebrating that. They was like, yay, Trump helping us with the opiate problem, yay. Now, I'm not going to play the clip that I played last time, but I talked about it before, and I told people to listen closer. I showed people, and I told people to listen closer to what Trump said he'd do about it. And I played the clip of him saying that he'll get the pharmaceutical industry to make new drugs. And not only that, he contracted the same big pharmaceutical family that created the opiates to be in charge of making the new drugs. Now, how much more pro-establishment can you get than that? But I'm not going to get more into it for now. It's just a few thoughts I have. Just a few thoughts, especially with this anti-capitalism nonsense. The notion that any of these government officials in either party are anti-establishment or against globalism is ridiculous. The ISTs are not the problem. The people are the problem. So switching from this IST to this IST is like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound.